Hello and welcome to the Cultured Bumpkin. Today, we are going to Friendly City Books in Columbus, Mississippi to talk to the owner, Emily Liner, and we're going to talk about Tennessee Williams and some other stuff. So come to the back room of the bookstore and join us. You're listening to the Cultured Bumpkin, a literature podcast with Jake Phillips, where we present audiobook quality readings of the classics for your enjoyment. Thank you for stopping by. And remember, just because you're a bumpkin doesn't mean you can't be cultured. All right, hello and welcome to the Cultured Bumpkin. Today, I'm doing one of my favorite things, which is a live interview. And we have Emily from Friendly City Books, and we're actually in Friendly City Books in Columbus, Mississippi, which is my favorite bookstore, by the way.
Thank you.
I haven't really verbalized that to you, but that's the truth. And thank you very much for being here.
I'm happy to be here.
So aside from you own Friendly City Books, can you tell us a little about yourself?
Yeah, so my name is Emily Liner, and Friendly City Books is about 2.5 years old now. We started in November 2020. And I returned to Columbus after having been gone for a while. So I moved back here in 2020, but I had been living on the East Coast for about 15 years. I went to high school here, and I grew up in Mississippi, but on the Gulf Coast in Bay St. Louis, which is about an hour from New Orleans. So Columbus is kind of my second home, or maybe my third home, but my current home and probably my forever home.
Well, did you get into, what got you interested in literature to the point, or reading, tell us about the journey to being a bookstore owner. That's incredible.
Yeah, so I didn't set out to be a bookstore owner, but it's something that happens. But my mom actually is not totally surprised that this is what I ended up doing, because I was an early reader. And I always hate telling this story because, talking about myself. But I actually started reading when I was 3 years old. That's the family legend, at least. So I was an early reader, loved reading. I was an only child, so books were my friends. This sounds a little goofy to say, but I was always had my head in a book when I was growing up. And part of that was for the entertainment value. And part of that was because I was just a very curious child. And I especially was always interested in travel. But we didn't have a lot of money when I was growing up. So I could travel through a book. And books were my gateway to other places and other times. This actually leads to our logo, because a lot of people ask me. And if you go to our website, you'll see that we have a paper plane. Mm-hmm. We have a paper plane on our logo on the store, and part of it is a nod to our local Air Force base, but part of it is because I think books take you places, and that is something that I thought about a lot when I was considering the idea of opening a bookstore, is to do that service that books did for me when I was a child for a new generation.
That is so cool. I love that. I was actually going to ask you what's the thinking behind the wonderful logo, but that's so cool. Columbus Air Force Base, which is a training base for fighter pilots, bomber pilots, and I guess any kind of transport in the U.S. Air Force, is right, a few miles right up the road. So I'm sure that you get a lot of military traffic in here. But that is so cool. So tell us about one of the things that makes your bookstore wonderful is the details, the character. And that is one I didn't even know, but now I do. Tell us about Scarlett.
Oh, yes. Okay. So Scarlett is our bookstore dog. And I'm laughing because, we often say that we work for Scarlett. Scarlett's not here right now while we're taping this podcast, but she is usually here at the bookstore whenever I'm here. So Scarlett's a beagle, and she's about 8 years old, and I adopted her when I was living in Washington, D.C. And she actually came from a rescue that got her from an animal shelter in South Carolina. So one of the perks of owning your own business is that you can bring in your pet whenever you want. And so I've totally taken advantage of that. But she has become this beloved figure here in the community because she greets everyone at the door with, like literally a smile on her face, and she's wagging her tail. And she's so good with kids. I mean, she will let kids do anything to her, pull her ears, whatever. She's very gentle. And Scarlett is also the star of her own book. We have a children's book here at the bookstore called Stretch Like Scarlett, which came about during the time when I was thinking about opening the bookstore. COVID hit, and I had to delay and shelve the bookstore for a little while. So I thought, what could I do during this time where, everything's on hold to keep the idea of the bookstore going? And, when you are in quarantine in your house for months at a time, you start to go a little bit crazy. I'm sure we all got a little cabin fever during the COVID, quarantine. And I spent a lot of time with my dog, and I just noticed how much she would stretch around the house. If she woke up from a nap, she would stretch. If I called her to come into the room, she would stretch. After she ate, before she ate. I mean, just like everything began and ended with a stretch. And I learned why they call the yoga pose downward dog and upward dog, because that was her thing. And she has textbook yoga poses, by the way. Like, mine will never be as good as hers. But so I came up with this little story about Scarlett stretching through the day on her way to the bookstore. So that's also become part of our brand as well, I guess you could say, is Scarlett and Scarlett's book. And we have Scarlett coloring pages. Scarlett's, usually on our Instagram and Facebook. She's a big part of the bookstore.
My son, who's 7, John William, was deathly afraid of dogs.
Really?
Deathly. Scarlett was, I think, the first dog that he ever touched voluntarily.
Oh.
And so Scarlett actually helped. Now he's not afraid of dogs. And so she was a big part of just being Scarlett, sweet little Scarlett, helped him overcome a unreasonable phobia to dogs.
Well,
so thank you to Scarlett.
I'm so glad to hear that. So before I opened the bookstore and Scarlett and I lived in DC, we used to do therapy dog visits. And it wasn't like a real certified, like she's not necessarily an emotional support dog, but there was a nonprofit called People Animals Love that would organize therapy dog visits to libraries and schools and nursing homes and hospitals. And so we used to do that in Washington. And I noticed that her two best demographics were little kids and old people. So we did a lot of library visits and nursing home visits. And that's how, that's another thing that led to the development of the Stretch Like Scarlett book, is I learned about children's attention spans through that process, and how much they can really listen to a book before they lose interest in it. So that experience informed the book a great deal. And Scarlett and I actually still do a lot of school visits today here in Columbus in our community, and we're going to have some field trips come through this week, actually.
That's outstanding. So if you're listening and you think, this bookstore sounds amazing, Emily sounds awesome, Scarlett sounds... Yes, you're thinking exactly right, and you have to stop. It's on 5th Street in Columbus, Mississippi, and you definitely need to come by and visit. And the link to Stretch Like Scarlett will be in the show notes. You should check that out. Look how cute Scarlett is and that kind of thing. Definitely get you a copy. Now let's talk about Tennessee Williams, who is originally from this very town.
That's right. He was born right here. And his birthplace, the home he was born in back in, I think it was 1911, is literally 2 blocks away from the bookstore. It's the first thing you see when you drive into Columbus.
So for those that are most people have heard of, Cat on a Hot Tin Roof, Elizabeth Taylor and Paul Newman. They've probably heard of Streetcar Named Desire. That's probably going to be it for most people. Can you tell us a little bit about Tennessee Williams, or just, it could be totally random factoids about who he was, what kind of work he did?
Yeah. So Tennessee Williams is mostly known as a playwright. And in fact, many consider him to be America's greatest playwright. So you're welcome, America, on behalf of the people of Columbus, Mississippi. So he's had a few plays that were turned into movies, which made him quite famous. But he actually wrote over 100 plays over his lifetime. And he wrote everything. He wrote across genres. He's also written novels. He's written poems, and he's written short stories, which is his newest work that's available. His publisher, New Directions, who they've published pretty much everything he's ever written. They just released previously unpublished short stories, and this collection is called The Caterpillar Dogs. He's also written his memoirs. He was just a constant writer. So he's best known for some of those plays like Cat on a Hot Tin Roof and Streetcar Named Desire and Glass Menagerie. I actually first learned about Tennessee Williams not from living in Columbus, but even before that. So I grew up in this town called Bay St. Louis, which is near New Orleans. And when my mother was a child, one of Tennessee Williams' plays was turned into a movie, and it was filmed in my hometown in Bay St. Louis. And this is a play that's, much further down the list of his best-known work. And it's called This Property is Condemned. And it's set in this small southern town that has a train station and trains pass through. And the property that is condemned is actually a whorehouse that the men who work on the train line frequent. And in the movie, Natalie Wood plays the daughter of the woman who owns the whorehouse. And Robert Redford plays a man who works for the train company who is passing through and is staying at the guest house. And he falls in love with Natalie Wood's character. So I grew up with the lore of this film in my consciousness, because a lot of people in Bay St. Louis actually have the movie poster, framed and displayed in their homes. And my mom has these very faint memories of Robert Redford walking around Bay St. Louis. So that is how I actually got to know Tennessee Williams. So, and then I ended up moving to his birthplace and have encountered a lot more of Tennessee Williams by virtue of living here.
That is so cool. In the front of the front window of the shop, there's a multitude of Tennessee Williams works. What all do you have here, if you can, right off the top of your head?
Oh gosh, we try to have as much as we can by and about Tennessee Williams. So we've got several of his plays that have been published into books. We've got, including, some of the ones that are, like the kind of under the radar, I guess you could say. Like there are some, there's one called The Night of the Iguana that has this like very bold green cover that always comes to mind for me. There's another one, and I can't remember if this is a play or short stories, but it's called Tales of Desire, The Rose Tattoo, and all of his books have these very like sensuous titles. And we also have his memoirs. We have a novel that he wrote called Moise and the Age of Reason. And I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing, I've never known if I'm saying the character's name correctly, but it's Moise. We've also got biographies of him. There's a very famous one written recently called, and I forgot what it's called, but it's by John Lahr, who is a theater critic for The New Yorker. There's also we have his memoirs. The introduction is written by John Waters, the movie director. So a lot of people have taken inspiration from Tennessee Williams over the years because he's just this like larger than life character who's inspired so much art in response to his plays. I mean, probably everybody has seen or known of a community theater or a high school theater that has put on a production of Streetcar Named Desire, right? Or the Glass Menagerie.
Exactly.
So here in Columbus, one unique way that we pay tribute to Tennessee Williams is we have this annual Stella shouting contest. Did you attend? Were you there?
I wanted to. My brother had a rodeo, and
well, that sounds equally exciting. But so, there's this famous scene in A Streetcar Named Desire, and specifically the film version of it starring Marlon Brando, where, he is trying to win back his, love. And he's screaming up, he's out on the street and he's screaming up at the window, Stella! And we have this, quirky and fun event every year where just anyone can enter this contest. And there's this great balcony, and so everyone will, yell up at this balcony and give their best Stella impression. So we just had that this week as part of the Tennessee Williams tribute that is organized every year. And this was, we try to do it around his birthday. He just would have turned 112 recently. His birthday is March 26th. So that was, something we did recently here in town. And that's why we have all the Tennessee Williams stuff out right now, because he just had a birthday. And we also have this new book by Tennessee Williams that I want to talk to you about. So and Tennessee Williams, like I said, has written he's written tons and tons and tons of material in lots of different genres. And his publisher recently decided to put into print something that has never been publicly available before. It's called The Caterpillar Dogs, and it's a collection of short stories. So there are 7 short stories in here, and it's more stuff that Tennessee Williams wrote. We can't get enough of it. And we were really lucky to actually get permission from the publisher to be the first bookstore in the country and probably in the entire world to put this book on sale, because we had to have it for the Stella shouting contest.
So you have, I'm looking at the hard copy right here. You have hard copies here in the bookstore?
Yeah, we have it here in the bookstore. We have it online at friendlycitybooks.com. It officially comes out to the world on April 4th. Okay. So by the time people listen to it, it'll be available everywhere. But we got a little head start.
Yeah, that's great. So you definitely need to check out the link in the show notes. Definitely check out the link in the show notes, and you will have you'll find the Caterpillar Dogs by Tennessee Williams.
Yeah, and one thing I actually love about this book is, it's short, it's easy to read. We have some new books out there right now. They're like 500 pages. There's a new fantasy book that came out that's like literally almost 900 pages. This is 7 short stories. You can read it in one sitting. It's $15, which, in the age of inflation, I'm really happy to have like a modestly priced option for people to enjoy. And it's so cool that we still have this new work coming out from someone from, I guess you could say, beyond the grave.
Yeah. And it's perfect for someone like myself that's always looking for new authors. If I'm going to start a new author or see if I like his or her work, I'm going to start with a poem or a short story, as opposed to some, War and Peace. Do I like Leo Tolstoy? I don't know. I'll read War and Peace and find out. That's not how I do it. I'll read a short story by Leo Tolstoy. In this case, this is perfect for, let's say you've never really read Tennessee Williams, to say, you know what, I'm going to get this book and I'm going to see if I like Tennessee Williams. And I bet that you will. But anyway, thank you so much for coming on today and talking with me.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
So after the interview, we were trying to figure out which Tennessee Williams piece to read, and then Emily narrowed it down like this.
I mean, I think maybe what I might do is read the very beginning of the Glass Menagerie, because and I actually forgot about this until I just reopened it. So there's a narrator, like an omniscient narrator character who starts, and he also says this thing where he talks about it being a play about memory, and that is a very classic Tennessee Williams quote and trope in his work. Okay. So this is probably the most classic thing to read, and it's about a page.
Okay.
Yes, I have tricks in my pocket. I have things up my sleeve. But I am the opposite of a stage magician. He gives you illusion that has the appearance of truth. I give you truth in the pleasant disguise of illusion. To begin with, I turn back time. I reverse it to that quaint period, the 30s, when the huge middle class of America was matriculating in a school for the blind. Their eyes had failed them, or they had failed their eyes, and so they were having their fingers pressed forcibly down on the fiery Braille alphabet of a dissolving economy. In Spain, there was revolution. Here, there was only shouting and confusion. In Spain, there was Guernica. Here, there were disturbances of labor, sometimes pretty violent, in otherwise peaceful cities such as Chicago, Cleveland, St. Louis. This is the social background of the play. The play is memory. Being a memory play, it is dimly lighted. It is sentimental. It is not realistic. In memory, everything seems to happen to music. That explains the fiddle in the wings. I am the narrator of the play and also a character in it. The other characters are my mother, Amanda, my sister, Laura, and a gentleman caller who appears in the final scenes. He is the most realistic character in the play, being an emissary from a world of reality that we were somehow set apart from. But since I have a poet's weakness for symbols, I am using this character also as a symbol. He is the long-delayed but always expected something that we live for. There's a fifth character in the play who doesn't appear, except in this larger-than-life-size photograph over the mantel. This is our father who left us a long time ago. He was a telephone man who fell in love with long distances. He gave up his job with the telephone company and skipped the light fantastic out of town. The last we heard of him was a picture postcard from Mazatlan on the Pacific coast of Mexico, containing a message of 2 words, hello, goodbye, and no address. I think the rest of the play will explain itself.
Thank you so much for listening. I really hope that you'll go to the show notes, check out Friendly City Books, and even purchase a copy of Caterpillar Dogs by Tennessee Williams. Support small business, I hope you'll subscribe, rate the show, and maybe tell a friend. Thank you very much for listening. You've been listening to The Cultured Bumpkin, a literature podcast with Jake Phillips. Thank you very much for listening. I really do appreciate it. If you enjoyed this, would you mind going and subscribing and leaving a nice review on whatever podcast platform you heard this on? I would really appreciate it. Thank you very much for listening, and we'll see you next time.